All right. Hi, everyone. Good evening, and thanks so much for being here, for taking time out of your busy schedules and joining us to talk about the film LFG and pay equity. And this is also just a really nice opportunity for us to come together and spend some time talking about this really important cause. For those of you who don't know, I'm Juliana Goldman, and I'm the founder of Mamaden. And Mamaden is a platform that connects and empowers women. It elevates the conversation around the work of motherhood at home and in the workforce. And we're also offering resources for women who want to stay in or return to the workforce.
Thanks, Juliana.
Yep.
I am Miriam Williams. I'm one of the co-founders of Superkin.
And hi, everyone. I'm Tara Henning, the other co-founder. So we're the team, Superkin, the team behind the Add to Resume Raising Humans campaign. And we're working with innovative executives and ERG leaders to improve the work lives of caregivers through benefit advisory services, programming, and workshops. And we are so happy to be here today with all of you.
And it's been so nice working with you guys to put this event together. So thank you. And of course, we are also joined by Molly Levinson tonight. Molly is the founder and CEO of the Levinson Group, a nationally recognized issues management and strategic communications firm. And also we're joined by Abby Greensfelder, the founder and CEO of Everywoman Studios, a full-service media company with a mission to tell female-focused, female-driven stories, creating positive cultural impact. And Abby's also one of the producers of LFG. So tonight we'll have a conversation about the film. We'll then open it up to questions. If you've already seen the film, great. If not, the link that we provided is good through April 17th, I believe. And otherwise, you can always watch it anytime on HBO Max. So we'll just watch a quick, to kick it off, let's just watch a quick trailer.
Here we go.
Is there sound?
Oh, is it not? Can you hear it?
Hear it.
You can't hear it?
No.
Uh-oh.
Is that better?
It's just so bad. We have pink hair, purple hair, tattoos, dreadlock, white girls, black girls. Yes, we play sports. Yes, we play soccer. But we're so much more than that.
We were ready to show the world real talent, real energy, real competitive drive.
But the story's the same everywhere. Women get paid less to do the same job. The fight for equal pay has been going on since this team started.
The mindset back then was you should just be grateful, darling, that you have a place to play.
Even though I'm on the USA team, I have to coach just to make ends meet. Childcare is more than my paychecks.
The men's team get more money, more marketing, better fields.
We were very frustrated and very angry. It's not fair.
The women on the U.S. soccer team are suing the U.S. Soccer Federation for equal pay. USSF does argue some women on the team got more compensation than some of the men did.
It's like, really?
And then it was like, hold my beer.
We win this World Cup. They would have no choice but to be on our side. That's when I felt the movement.
We got the entire world on our side.
I want to leave this team better than I found it on and also off the field.
This will be one of those landmark decisions talked about for decades.
Anything less than winning is a failure.
If you want the world to look a certain way, you have to fight to get there. It's time. It is time. It is time. Let's go. Let's go!
I could watch that, I think, over and over again. I mean, it's such a, just like, I get goosebumps watching that. And so Abby and Molly, wonder if you could just rewind a bit and begin at the beginning and tell us how the film, how it all came together. Abby, we'll start with you. Yeah.
Well, it's an interesting one. All good things come from a good friendship. I had just started this new studio, Everywoman Studios. I had been making sort of unscripted TV for many years, and I'd transitioned to starting this new company with the goal of telling female-centered stories in places where we don't see them. And sports was sort of a genre that was close to my heart. And just after founding the company, and Molly knew that I was starting the company, and I think it was in March, I'd started the company that spring of 2019. I knew that Molly was working with the team, and it was on the International Women's Day that the team sued their employer, US Soccer. It was front page of all the papers. And I remember talking to Molly, one, being excited that this was happening because it was a very big deal. And two, saying, well, who's telling the story? Do you have a crew, like a documentary crew, or, is ESPN doing something? And she said, well, no. And once I started to talk to her about it, I realized why. And part of that is because US Soccer controls the rights and the access and so forth. And so the usual suspects that might cover the story weren't, because of the equal pay case was kind of territory where no one could go. But in talking to Molly, I felt like this was such an incredible story, and it felt like what the women were doing and what Molly was working on felt to me very much like a moment for women in our culture. And it was exactly why I started this company. So it was kind of a throwdown moment for me of, well, I just have to find a way to make this possible. And that sort of started the journey of figuring out how to tell the story.
And I feel like something that was just very much the essence of that moment was, obviously there's this huge story to tell, and it has profound implications for the world. But the simple restriction of access of footage is holding us back from being recognized the way that we should have been. And that's just one piece of what was holding us back. And I think that sort of understanding that moment of all the access that we had to create to be able to tell this story, all of the barriers that had to be broken to get to the moment, to be able to get to the World Cup, to make sure that people recognized, who this group of women were who were fighting this, every single step of the way, the players having to do all of the work themselves in a lot of cases. That sort of access problem, I think, captures so much of what the fight was about, especially in those early days.
Yeah, I mean, you could make it would be interesting to talk about sort of this, what we found out of the story behind the story.
Yeah.
As Molly says, and Molly knew so intricately because she was working with the team, but there are definite reasons why the story hadn't been told before. And the sort of mechanics of the rights and the access and the way that the women were able to monetize their own, their own likenesses, their own brand, their own story is in itself part of what meant that no one was able to do this, and the fact that knowing Molly, and she was so close in, like, helped me navigate what was an incredibly challenging set of obstacles, which at any moment could have blown the project up. I think that's fair to say, wouldn't you say, Molly?
Yeah.
And I think we later found out there were others along the way who had tried, but it was just a very sort of a tough, needle to thread.
Can you give an example of that? Like, was there specific, do you think, through the film, like specific footage that that you guys were able to get that, like, had ESPN said, ahead of time, we want to be there for this, they would have been told no, like just to try and understand.
Well, we
what
had,
that
for
really looks
example,
like.
I mean, really to go to any of the US women's national team games that are set up through US soccer, which is the vast, basically all the games, or their training or anything else, you have to have access.
Right.
And we were aware sort of early on that anything on the equal pay case, that they would not grant that access. So one of the things that we did, number one, what we did have was the women. They can't control the women and their stories. So that, of course, was really ultimately the story we wanted to tell, was what it's like to go through this process as a woman, through this sort of fight on the field and off the field. And the off the field part of it was as, if not more important than the on the field, because we all see the on the field in the games. But I, as a producer and a storyteller, was very interested in the off the field, because I feel like in general, we often don't see stories about athletes, you know, that are really dimensionalized. We certainly don't see stories of female athletes that are dimensionalized. So I was very interested in what is it like to be a working professional athlete, and what is it like to do that while you are fighting for your rights, both on and off the field. So that was interesting. And we could tell that personal story. Where it was challenging was where the personal story met the sports field, you know, the game. And there were certain places, like, for example, there's some really beautiful footage in the film that's like very high quality, slow motion footage. And we were able to shoot that footage originally because we got access through CONCACAF, which is for any of you like soccer nerds out there, CONCACAF, you might know because it's the federation that the US team, both men and women, play to get to qualify for the World Cup. So it's sort of it's the gateway to the World Cup, and the women play in CONCACAF to qualify. And we were able to get access through CONCACAF to be on the field. And that was sort of a creative way. And the directors, it was kind of a brilliant, and one of our coordinating producers actually, who worked in the sports arena, had that brilliant idea. That was how we were able to get a lot of the game footage for the movie.
That's remarkable. And have you heard from other journalists and reporters and other, you know, through other outlets who've like praised how you were able to figure out how to tell this story? Like, what's been the reaction from your
Molly might have good insight into that, because she's talking
definitely
to all these reporters all the time, right?
I mean, I think one of the most complicated factors of the sort of sports ecosystem is this dynamic, which is that, you know, there's a very strong relationship between the small number of outlets that cover sports in the US, and in particular, by the way, women's sports, though that's growing, and we should give a shout out to anybody who covers women's sports, but that's a very, very small number of media outlets. And so they're very reliant on their relationships with leagues and with brands and with teams. And so it's hard to be a disruptor. It's hard to be a union. It's hard to be an individual athlete in this ecosystem. Particularly hard to be a woman athlete. And so, I mean, I remember one of the earliest days when Abby had this amazingly brilliant idea for this film. And it was actually right before the World Cup. There was a big celebration that the US Soccer Federation had in Los Angeles that was going to sort of, I mean, it was an amazing moment for a lot of us and for the players, because it was the first time that the 99ers, who, I mean, I assume most people have watched the film and most people sort of understand who the 99ers are. That was the team that won the World Cup, that started the conversation about pay equity on the field. And the 99ers came to Los Angeles to meet with this current team. It was extremely emotional. It was the first time that these two groups, and by the way, the 2019 team, the team that you see in the movie, were all sort of inspired to play soccer from this group of women who had come before them, who had started this conversation, but also, you know, in their own right, all Olympic athletes, all World Cup champions. And Abby and I were there, and Abby was like, film horizontally on your iPhone. Like there was no access. Like we were like running around this like stadium in Los Angeles, like shooting horizontally on our iPhones, because there was no way that the Federation was going to give access to footage. And yet it was this, and by the way, there wasn't access even through a lot of media outlets to the footage, but it was this historic moment, so meaningful and profound for what we were doing. And I think I mean, definitely sort of that kind of scrappiness in terms of production and direction and thought and ideas that went into the film, like started in those earliest days, I think.
And I think what was interesting to me as sort of an outsider to this world going to that event, which was in April of 2019, was, so I mean, we are in April. What was so interesting about it was Molly and the sort of PA, the union and the players had kind of coalesced this group of supporters, which again, you know, to me as an outsider kind of seemed like an, you know, not that hard thing to do, but actually, again, they're navigating both alongside US soccer, but sort of in this lawsuit, you know, against US soccer and in the stadium. And the fact they managed to coalesce this group, which included advertisers, sponsors, a bunch of celebrities, and that you could kind of see, I could see there the seeds of a movement. Like I could see there that this was bigger than like one team and one lawsuit. Because as Molly articulated, you had this incredible sense of history repeating itself with the 99ers, who, by the way, I happen to be in the same hotel as them. And they all, of course, like good former soccer players, what did they do? They went to the bar. So I'm sitting there and I'm total fangirling because I grew up watching, and I played sports, and I grew up watching these players. And, you know, Julie Foudy and Michelle Akers, and they're all in there, and they're all in there with their kids, you know, who are like my kids' ages. And it just struck me that, and nobody knew who they were because they were just in this hotel bar. And, you know, people were in with work events, and, you know, there was some like wedding happening at the hotel, and they had faded into obscurity. And it struck me that here I was in LA. These are some of the most famous female soccer players in history. They're here with their kids and no one knows who they are. And it was kind of this moment of like, part of the goal of this story too was almost like to capture an archive of a moment so that this story will not be forgotten, because I think most people, unless besides the kind of ardent fans, a lot of people had forgotten their story, the 99ers, how hard they had worked, that they were really the first team to kind of popularize soccer, women's sports in a big way, that they pressed to try and get a professional league set up, that they pressed to tour. They organized their own tour, to victory tour across the US, that they fought alongside Billie Jean King. And some of that we got in the movie. Like, I wish we could have had more, but we did get some of that in the movie. But they were just kind of, you know, they just felt like regular citizens, you know, in a way that had they been male athletes, like if you had, for those who watched the great Chicago Bulls series, like the Michael Jordan, if you had that team in the bar, people would go, they would have been, you know, social media posting, the whole thing would have been shut down. So it's just, it was sort of a moment of, like Molly was saying, I just felt that weekend, it was like, we have to make this happen. I don't know how. We got to do it.
I thought that,
and we did.
And you did swimmingly. There were a lot of jaw-dropping moments in the film, but I feel like when my chin really hit the ground was when this section on the US Soccer's response to the lawsuit. and the indisputable science that women were inferior to men, essentially, so they should be paid less. First of all, obvious. On a separate question, I want to know, like how the lawyers got that through and how it was approved, even though they ended up being fired. However, like, can you take us into the room when you saw that for the first time and you read it and your initial response, and like what, as you started to hear from players, what did that?
You should take that. That was the weekend COVID started to break.
I want to get to that next.
Molly was like, we were all talking about that game, but you should tell that story.
I remember, so the way the like behind the scenes and the other thing the film does masterfully is make like litigation and communications around litigation look like as amazingly sexy as it possibly could ever be, which it is not usually.
Yeah, but you make it look good.
See, that's what I'm saying,
yeah,
right?
Totally.
So,
I said she's gonna sell those necklaces.
Okay, so now I'm gonna use all these, like the behind the scenes, like, so this legal filing gets filed, which is like, we get it. We basically like see it out of this program called Pacer. And I remember sort of getting the email, the alert that a filing went on the system. And one of the strategic things we had done, the sort of tactical secrets of this lawsuit, is that we had trained the press corps around it, really around the filings, because the filings were news events for us. And so when a filing hit, we, for years and years, would just, make the biggest deal out of it, because that's your news, that's your moment. And so the filing came in, and I remember reading it and thinking to myself, oh my God, there's just a gold mine in here. They're dead. Like right. the minute we show this to the world. And I remember sort of feverishly, we all got together, we were writing a statement, and I was like, they literally have admitted that they're cavemen. So that's what our statement has to say. They are cavemen.
That's right, Molly had the cavemen line.
They're what?
She had this cavemen line.
Oh,
yeah. So I was like, they're cavemen. They've admitted that they are living in, and I also remember saying to one of my colleagues, like, what era did cavemen live in? I think it was Paleolithic. Like we were trying to, and so we, blasted a statement out about this filing, sort of pointing to the words in the filing. And, we got on a call, and the player said, well, what can we do next? And I said, what are you talking about? We have to hold them accountable. Like, everybody made the decision, like from Carlos, who was the president of US Soccer, down, everybody made this decision. They're all cavemen. We have to hold them accountable. And so that was it wasn't that hard to do. I think that should be reassuring. It's reassuring that, when sponsors, when, MLS, the Major League Soccer owners, when sort of the establishment just read their words. I mean, you didn't have to do very much, but just read like the misogynist, sexist words that they had, people were outraged. And
the timing of it was unfortunate for them and fortunate for Molly and the team, because they did this right on the eve of this game. And it was a nationally televised game. And Julie Foudy was announcing it. And she read the words live. I mean, we cover that in the movie. I remember I was watching it. We were actually supposed to be at the game.
Yeah.
But COVID was going crazy. And you had the sense that everything was shutting down. And we had this moment of, could we get a camera in there? In the end, we couldn't. We were not filming there that day, but I was watching the game live. And I remember the words, come up on the screen, and Julie Foudy's reading it. And the players, and we cover this in the movie, kind of decided they needed to make some physical protest, and they turned their jerseys inside out. And Jess McDonald, like one of the things we had done to the point of the access is that we had given, and this was the director's, like one of Sean Fine, who's one of the directors, but himself also a cinematographer, is a big kind of gadget person. And had one of the challenges was like, how are we going to get cameras in places while people are traveling and all this stuff? So we'd have gotten a couple of these little small cameras and also had people do iPhone footage and whatnot. But Jess McDonald had filmed the little moment in the locker room when they're so pissed off and they do an LFG and they turn their stuff inside out. And that was kind of a little bit of an inside moment there that we got because our main characters were able to capture themselves. Like they're allowed to do that, right? They can post stuff on social. But it was a real, when you cover these stories, the thing people don't know about documentaries is, of course, you never know where the story's going to end or where it's going to go usually. And, we didn't know, of course, Molly didn't know, the team didn't know what was going on with the lawsuit, but you had this moment. And I think that, I was like, it's over. This is the moment. It's going to be over. They're going to have to settle or do something, but that didn't happen.
Well, and then COVID hits.
And then COVID hits.
And I want to ask this question, then I'll turn it over to Tara and Miriam. But I thought it was interesting that, as you followed along in the film, you could tell based on some of the camera angles that this was filmed. There were parts that were filmed during COVID, but COVID never really entered into the content of the film.
Yeah, it did a little, but not really. On purpose, because the film wasn't about that, but we did mark that moment in time because it was kind of part of the timeline and how then the team and the lawsuit had to go on and all of that was happening.
You couldn't ignore it. But for you guys, I'm sure away from the documentary, like your mothers, your kids' schools were shut down. Can you talk a bit about like how you did it, how you continued on, navigating the lawsuit, producing the film with working mothers?
That is such a great question. I feel like, first of all, the film doesn't really touch on COVID for good reason, but COVID really had an impact on the lawsuit. COVID had an impact on sports, on the sports industry, like a really significant impact on the industry overall, in numerous ways. And I think, obviously we had an Olympics planned for that summer, and we were counting, frankly, now the lawsuit is over, we were counting on the Olympics as a major pressure point in the lawsuit, in addition to everything else. And it didn't happen. I think in the midst of it, it was, I cannot like overstate how hard it was for the athletes in particular to get through those early days and early months when there was everything that was unknown. And I think for me, just like probably every working mom here, sort of juggling the anxiety and the questions of what's going to happen to, our work, to our business, to, our family is going to be okay. Are we going to be safe? And then, of course, having this effort that is so important to all of us, trying to achieve pay equality, having it sort of hang over our heads and be undone. It just was unfinished. And so I think like at that moment, it was really hard. But in hindsight, looking back at that time, and I think that is what is so amazing from the benefit of perspective, looking back, that time was so valuable for the players because they didn't have to work 3 jobs during that. They couldn't train. They couldn't, they didn't have to fly around the world day after day after day, playing game after game after game while they were trying to fight a lawsuit and while they had to work another job just to make ends meet. So for them, they all really sort of had time to reflect and to plan and to grow, that it wasn't of their own choosing. And I think at the end of the day, that time that they had to sort of step back with their families and sort of think about more than just the next game and the next flight and the next thing, made a profound difference in this effort and their sort of contribution to it.
Oh, that's fascinating. I mean, I think of Jess McDonald as the example, as an example in that, because the imagery of her doing the push-ups with her son and the idea that she would be trying to navigate the lawsuit and coaching and playing and taking care of her child. It's just so hard. Abby, what about you?
I mean, it's interesting. I think what Molly said was really insightful. I mean, I think that for us, it was very much how do we make possible the ongoing telling of the story? Because the story is not stopping, but we can't get there. So this kind of sending these cameras and this kind of things, and we had to do some remote interviews and whatnot. That was one part of it. But I do think there was also sort of kind of this retrenchment. I think there was, leading up to that moment we were just talking about at the game, there was sort of a sense of momentum building. Like you could feel this pressure point, and Carlos had resigned, and then COVID and it kind of was just this limbo. And of course, what ended up happening in the middle of that limbo, the judge ruled on the case, which I think no one was expecting to happen.
Right.
And caught everyone totally out of, from left field. And, thankfully we had deployed these cameras and things, because that was like a genuinely caught moment that no one saw coming. I mean, the players, I think it's safe to say, Molly, nobody really saw that ruling coming down at that time in that way. We certainly didn't. I mean, the producers who had been following this, we were kind of just in limbo. We weren't even really waiting for a ruling per se.
And that was in April.
So that was this moment just out of nowhere. And we had to kind of, it was Molly's birthday.
It was my birthday. Also, speaking of motherhood, because I feel like this is a perfect venue for this.
Oh, Henry.
Yeah. So of course, if everybody watched the movie, this is like, you see me sort of break down and lose my mind and sob when we get this ruling. And you see that because my son, Henry, who was obsessed with the gadgets that Abby and Sean and Andrea gave us, the camera, the microphone, he had recorded himself, filmed himself, done all of this stuff with my gadgets. And this moment happens. And I think Andrea said to him, Henry, go set up all that's, you know what to do with it. Go set it up around your mom. I had no idea that he had done that. I was dealing with my lawsuit and on my conference call. And so then at the end, he's like, yeah, I filmed it. And I was like, what part? Which part did you film? And actually you will see a credit to him if you
got a credit. I was
just gonna ask.
He got a credit.
He got a credit because it was special. I mean, he actually, the cameras, which were very cool, but they weren't that intuitive.
No, they were,
very high quality, HD quality little camera, but, it took Henry, the resident
Yeah.
technology-philic, then 13-year-old to be able to figure out
Yeah.
how to make it work. But I mean, this was how kind of much that caught us all by surprise. But I think Molly's right that the fact that there was that sort of limbo ultimately caused everybody to, I think, realize why this was important and why it mattered, and that, which was why they did it in the first place. Like, I think when you do something that is so hard for so long, and these are athletes, let's not forget. So the concept of kind of discipline and endurance, I mean, I think I thought of that a lot when it came to this lawsuit, because I think they deployed all those skills. And I remember Molly saying to me at one point, which was also very true, that someone she had worked with in another sphere on another case or project had told her, and I'm paraphrasing so she can correct me, but sort of when it comes to movements, that there are people that sort of, you toil on it the whole time and it ebbs and flows, and sometimes it's on the front burner, and sometimes people pay attention, and sometimes it all feels like there's energy around it. And then there's the times where it feels like nothing's moving forward and nobody cares and it's not sexy. And the whole point is that the people that drive the movement forward, they're there the whole time. You know, other people come in and out when it's sexy or it's fun or it's interesting or it's dramatic. But the players and Molly and all the team that were behind it, I mean, it was a grind. And I think that period, I mean, Molly could weigh in, but that was a real grinded out period.
It was a very,
and people were, you know, they were afraid and tired, and that was on top of the anxiety of the pandemic. But that's kind of how movements happen. They don't happen because it's like fun and people just come in when it's fun to be part of it. And that really resonated with me, not just as someone telling the story, but just on a personal level, kind of a life lesson, you know, for my business, for my life. It's like anything you care about, you know, it's not the work you put in when it's sexy and fun that matters. It's the work you put in when you want to pull your hair out and you're exhausted and you feel like you have nothing left to give. Like that's the work that matters in the end, you know? And I think that's what this team showed me. That's what Molly showed me, all those that worked on that. It taught me a lot, just kind of being around to watch it. It was very inspiring for me.
well, and I have to say,
peripheral to the story, but could see just how hard it was.
well, and just, I mean, just because, I mean, Abby, I mean, one other story of that day. So, you know, we have this terrible news. It's my birthday, you know, we're doing all this stuff. And we sort of finished for the night. And it was really in the midst of COVID. I mean, it was a time when you just,
that's right.
We didn't really go outside. Like,
you didn't want to leave your house.
We didn't leave your house. And I remember, and Abby called me. She was like, I'm coming over. And she made me my favorite cocktails in a beautiful pitcher. And she brought them over to my house. And we were both like, what do we do? Like, do we be inside together? And it's just those moments, I think, like, that are so meaningful in a friendship. And, you know, so profound professionally and personally when you have someone like that, who you are in the trenches with. And Abby was in the trenches with me and us every step of the way, but then also just, you know, taking that step back. And I think that was the only high point. That was like the only good thing that happened.
It was a sad,
what was the cocktail?
Sad, hard moment.
I think it was a Negroni.
It was definitely a Negroni. Yeah. And it was funny now that you're reminding me. Yeah, we had like nobody was getting together. We sat in the backyard.
Yeah, Abby was like, we should.
And we drank Negroni.
I was like, can I hug you? And she's like, we should go outside. You know,
I came up the side, like over the grass with like the Negronis. But it was kind of like, it was just kind of an instinctual thing. Like, it felt like, you know, here on like Molly's birthday, it was just a sad, you know, it felt like you wanted to be together and kind of mourn this moment, but also like, you're going to get through it.
Yeah.
Like I knew in that moment. And of course they did.
Yeah.
They did. Like we didn't know how in that moment, because it felt like a very tough, unpredicted, couldn't see it coming kind of side punch, but they figured it out.
$24 million later.
$24 million later, they rounded all the bases, to use a different sports metaphor.
Tara and Miriam, do you guys have a couple questions?
I'm personally just trying to compose myself. You guys have me like crying over here, talking about social movements and, certainly challenging the gender norms and the gender narratives is a slog sometimes. So inspiring to hear that. And I'm along those lines, I'm curious. I loved seeing Oprah and Snoop Dogg get on the train, and I'm just curious, like fangirling how those moments like how came to be and what it felt like to kind of see Snoop getting in on it too, and the Obamas and the Bidens and everybody in between. But
I mean, what I will say, we saw that clip at the very beginning, where after the World Cup, the players did a ticker tape parade with the mayor and then sort of addressed the world in the wake of their victory. And Megan says, this is so much bigger than soccer. And, when we first said, like in these crazy middle of the night meetings, when we decided to file the lawsuit, we said, okay, our objective is this is for everybody. This is going to reach everybody. And, there was another point in time when Megan, I can't remember if she says it in the film or if this is something she said afterwards, but she captured it again when she said, when we win, everybody wins. And so I think, when Snoop Dogg, Oprah, the president of the United States, major Republican senators, the team owners for Major League Soccer, NFL players, name the person, name the stakeholder. We wanted them all to be on board, and we tried really, really hard not to compartmentalize ourselves and not to push people away. Like we didn't want it to be just even though it's so powerful as a women's movement for pay equality, we wanted it to be everybody's. And so I think it helps a lot that these athletes are like global celebrities. It helps a lot for the argument that we make about their value too. And so, but I think that piece of it, just like not turning like talking in a way, working in a way where we want everybody to be on board, was just a fundamental piece of what they wanted to do with the lawsuit.
I love that. And yeah, she did say that in the movie. My other favorite Megan Rapinoe line is "Hold my beer." I thought that was like so perfectly, like, let me just get in the ring. So
she is a great communicator.
Truly. Yeah. She's so charismatic and so eloquent and gets like right to the point. She is such an incredible leader.
The best part of it too is that you had in this, which I think the team did very well, not surprisingly, because of course a team is used to playing different positions and we all have different skills, but they really, and this was something we tried to get across in the movie, is that it really was a team effort, the lawsuit, and they organized themselves in a very strategic and tactical way. And there were people that were engaged with Molly 24/7, and then they had like their communication train and they had their, so it was very interesting that they all had a role. And Megan, if she was sort of the front woman, you know, there were also people like Becky Sauerbrunn, who was kind of I said she was like the Yoda. You know, she was this sort of the classic captain center back for those who play soccer. You know, she was leading from the back. She wasn't a striker. She's not the shiny player that everyone has their jersey, but she's like the last player off the field. She is the one that everyone trusts. And she was as important, I think, in navigating the ups and downs of the lawsuit. Or someone like Kristen Press, who was kind of like the chief operating officer in a way, like very tactically involved. And so that was really interesting to see how they really worked as a group, even though, like, certainly in the movie, Megan's sound bites, you know, we leveraged that because she's just such a great storyteller.
Tara, do you want to ask a quick question?
Actually, that was some of mine. You kind of just answered it, of just like the dynamics between like the personalities and who they are on and off the field. But that's awesome to hear. A quick question for me is like, big fan of it. This has been so awesome to hear the insides, behind the scenes stories. What was it like for you all to hear the success of the film, and just as like from a film perspective, and recently being nominated for an Emmy, what was that like, and how did that make you feel?
I mean, I will say that going into the process, it's kind of nerve-wracking because, number one, I felt like we had one shot to tell the story, and the women had given us their trust, and like, hell were we gonna mess it up? You know, so I was just, and Molly knows this because, you know, I would come to her for advice occasionally. It was a really hard movie to make for so many reasons, but I was just very intent on doing them justice. And so I think there was a lot of sort of relief for me, to be totally honest. Like, I remember the moment we showed Molly the final version, which is, you can appreciate the challenges of, like, Molly's like one of my best friends on the planet, but she's also the communications head of this team. And it's a feature documentary with CNN. So it has to be sort of journalistically, you know, she wasn't seeing cuts. Megan wasn't seeing cuts, you know, so we were trusted by them to do a good job. But there was this moment where Molly saw the film, and I'm just sitting there like, oh, please God, let her like it, you know, because she knows the players. And I knew if she liked it, like, they would like it. And I think there's like a theme here of wine, because I think I brought our favorite wine.
She did. She gave me like a
because I knew that Molly would be stressed. I was certainly stressed. I'm like, I'm going to bring our favorite glass of wine. Here, we're going to watch this thing. But then when she saw it, she was like, it's amazing. I wouldn't change a thing. And I almost wanted to cry, because it was just like, okay.
I mean, I have to say more than that, because.
But then she was like, and I hate how I look. And I was like, that is not true. And you all can say, because when I watched this movie, so my kids actually and my husband got to watch an early version, as happens. And my kids, like, Molly's like a second parent to my kids. But my daughter, after watching the movie, first she said, this is the best movie I've ever seen. Then second, she goes, Molly is my hero. Yeah. She is such a badass. And I was like, okay, we're good here.
Yeah.
And the scene of kind of Molly being emotional, also my kids really related to that, because we all wanted to see that. Like, to me, strength is being able to feel the emotion of that, and then be able to pull together and go and fight and get what you deserve, which Molly did. So I just have to say, like, it's a very vulnerable making thing for the women, for Molly, for everyone who, to put yourself out there, not know what the end product is going to be, and take a leap of faith. But anyway, so more than anything, I was like genuinely relieved, which is not, you know. And then I think as time went on, once people were like, oh, we like it, then it was kind of more fun to go to like the screenings and all this kind of stuff.
And it's been nominated now. It's nominated for a Sports Emmy. It's won a ton of awards. But I think, you know, there's two things for me that have to be said about the film. One is, it is the best storytelling. I mean, it is such a hard story to tell for so many reasons. And just the vision that went into it, the way Abby sort of thought through the whole production, like everything that went into it, the music, the graphics, like every piece of it is just so intentional and wonderful. And then, I mean, we won, and we wouldn't have won without this film. We wouldn't have won this lawsuit without the overwhelming support that we were able to get, because Abby made it accessible. She told this story, on a huge platform, and a lot of people related to it, and a lot of people heard it. And, what the players wanted ultimately. Yeah, the U.S. soccer didn't like it, but they should have participated in it, and maybe they'll learn their lesson in the future, and they'll, maybe they'll participate the next time. But I think it certainly gave a very fair platform for them to participate on, and I think that the legacy of this lawsuit and this effort and this movement is because of LFG. And I think, there's so much more that I am sure everybody on this Zoom wants to do, and certainly a ton more that the players want to do and everyone around them. And they'll be able to do it. I think they'll be able to make that kind of change because of the way that this film connects all of these issues to the larger world.
And in part because of two very badass women.
Very nice to say. That is my personal PR.
Well,
I don't know that that's all totally true, but I do think that, I do hope, and this was the goal with the movie, that yes, this was a movie, or is a movie, that was capturing a moment in time, but the hope was always that it would be kind of like archiving history, because I very much felt from the beginning that this was history in the making. And I think we've seen that to be the case since this came out. Molly went to the White House with a bunch of players and former players with Equal Pay Day. And you've seen just like an enormous uptick in women's sports at the NCAA tournament, highest ratings ever, players on that, college level players getting millions and millions of social media followers, and being able to translate that to kind of economic success. And so I really do think the woman who coached the winning NCAA team actually said she was inspired by LFG to negotiate the largest salary for any professional coach at her level in history.
Yeah. Yep.
And so I think it's sort of, the metaphor of like what Molly and these women started, which was really a movement. We just kind of got on the train. And the hope was to, like, in some spaces outside of the people that would normally pay attention to the movement, to amplify it. The movement was already going. The people were screaming equal pay at the World Cup, for gosh sakes. But I think what's cool about it is you never know with a movement where it gets started, but you just see where it's going. And I think we'll look back on what these women did and say it changed the business of sports for women forever. I really believe that.
Well, and again, thanks to not only the badass women players, but also the badass women in front of the camera, including Molly, and also you, Abby, behind the camera. So, like, thank you and bravo.
And shout out to
bravo to you guys.
My director partners, who I think just put in, I mean, it's a very hard movie to make. And when we talk about, they're married to each other. So you can imagine never being able to escape it in COVID with your, it was a really hard film to make, but I'm really proud of it. And it kind of amazes me how relevant it still is. And hopefully, what these women have done inspires people moving forward. Now we need to update the ending, right?
Yeah. So what's next?
Yes, but anyway.
Just one final question for each of you so that we'll wrap up by 9. One question is, like, looking where we go from here, Molly, with this the settlement was contingent on the collective bargaining agreement. Like, what exactly does that mean? It's okay for us to still celebrate the settlement, right? And then Abby, and this is a question from Julia in the chat, but what's next for you? Where do you point your lens next?
So the short answer is the Federation committed to equal pay moving forward. They committed to ratifying the settlement through the CBA negotiations. And so once those are complete, which we have a lot of confidence they will eventually be, everything that we got in the settlement, equal pay moving forward, equal working conditions and the like, will all be put into place.
This is amazing. Plus back pay, which is so critical to have, because that, I think Molly said to me, and I think it's true, and this was highly reported on, but I think that was an admission that US Soccer had done something wrong, right? That they apologized, that they hadn't treated the women the same. Mm-hmm. And I think that was as important as anything else. It's one thing to say, oh, we'll make it equal going forward. But it's another thing to say, I'm sorry, we did not treat you right. We're going to correct those wrongs. And that was a critical piece of the settlement that they achieved.
Now you have to answer what's next for you.
Oh, what's next for us? So we're sort of I'm turning my lens on the music business and sort of how the music business, finding in a way, if LFG was a story that was in women in sports, but spoke to broader issues and culture and whatnot, we're working on a story that's about women in the music business that tells a broader story about women in our culture, among other things. But that's sort of our next big feature documentary project we're working on.
Oh,
until Molly has another good crisis to pull me into.
Exactly.
Crisis story, of which there are ample.
Yeah. Well, thank God for your friendship and for bringing this story to light. It really is just such a beautiful backstory, and thank you for letting us share that tonight.
Yeah, and bringing it all back to this group and what you all are doing. I mean, Molly and I met when our kids were 2 and 2.5 years old in preschool together, and we were both sort of moms working, had careers, had kids, and that's really how we forged our friendship and have been sort of friends, but also like, cheering each other's like ups and downs, careers and kids and all this stuff. So I think the kind of work that you all are doing with working families and supporting parents, childcare and all this stuff, I mean, this is how this friendship was forged. And I think those years are both the hardest in some ways, but also the most meaningful. So it's all about, I mean, the friends that I've made in those years are some of my dearest friends.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
thank you for that. Thank you all for being here. I want to also say this group and others that will get a recording. We were also raised, I think, like $280 or almost $300 for the Women in Sports Foundation. So happy to see that. And I think a lot of inspiring words tonight to continue the fight. So really want to thank everyone for being here.
Thank you so much for having us too.
Thank you guys.
Thank you both. Thanks
Nice
everyone.
And LFG.
Yeah, LFG.
More swearing, more
LFG.
doing.
Here's to that.
All right. Have great evenings, everyone.
Thank you so much.
For the time.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye.